Hello everybody, I'm Chris. Welcome to Melchester Model Railway. I'm up here in the loft. Today I'm going to be looking at some of these Bachmann 00 gauge livestock and farming figures. These are from the 1940s and 50s and the post-war farming figures. So let's have a look at these. Right then, so here we are up at the workbench, and here we've got the Bachmann branch line 00 scale 1940/50s livestock farming figures. So authentically detailed model. And we've got the post-war farming figures. So these are from Bachmann Scenecraft. So we've got 6 figures in each pack. And just looking at them through the packaging, they do look quite well detailed and nicely painted too. So let's just have a little look inside. So they're quite well packaged. So we've got some chap here. That's very nice. He's got a hail bale on his back, with it holding it sort of pierced on a nice stick. Here we've got someone shifting a milk churn. Here we've got some old chap with his stick. Now this is I'm going to use for Farmer Barleymow at the cottage, at Maryley Cottage. So that is going to be Farmer Barleymow. Here we've got another figure, farming figure, and some young chap with a bucket. So that's the livestock and farming figures. So now let's take a look at the, move those aside. These are the post-war farming figures. So quite well protected in their packaging. So what have we got? So here we've got some chap with a fork. Busy working away, that's quite nice. Some of these characters I think I'm going to put on my various allotments. Here's someone with a rake. Oh, we've got a nice wheelbarrow there. Not sure who's pushing the wheelbarrow, maybe he's pushing the wheelbarrow. This overalled gentleman. Now, is that a beehive? Oh no, it looks like punnets of tomatoes or perhaps strawberries. Some chap here shifting a big sack of grain. And no, it's not the Grim Reaper, it's some chap with a scythe. So I've got the odd cornfield on Melchester, so we may have him cutting a bit of grass or something like that. So let's just take a closer look at all of those figures again. So here are all the figures laid out, and hopefully you can see them a little bit more clearly now. I hope they're going to be able to lend a little bit of activity to various parts of the layout. So let's go and position them. And what better place to start than at Maryley Cottage? Here's Farmer Barleymow coming out of the cottage. I think he's his farming days are finished now, he's in retirement, and he's enjoying his delightful cottage garden. So here he is walking down the path with his walking stick, probably on his way to the little allotment that's at the back, to see how things are progressing there. I wouldn't fancy his chances of getting up again if he was to sit down in one of those deck chairs. And we've passed through the garden now into the little allotment which is at the back of Merrily Cottage. And in this scene, I've placed the boy with the bucket, which he's just filled up with water at the tap. You can just see by the greenhouse. Farmer Barlimo's fruit and veg seems to be doing very well, with tomatoes growing, cauliflowers, cabbages, and some rather huge pumpkins, which I think he's been growing for the Melchester Annual Horticultural Society show. Here's one of the cornfields I mentioned earlier, and this picturesque scene is really given a sense of scale by the addition of the figure hunched over carrying the hay bale on his back with the stick, making his way out of the field. Before we move on to look at some of the other figures, let's just pause for a moment at the vicarage, because here's an additional figure from another Bachmann set of standing figures. Here's Mrs. Vicar in her garden. Not many vegetables, but lots of flowers this time, some growing in pots, and some roses growing over the door, and some nice white picket fencing. She's obviously enjoying a moment out on the lawn. Now we move over to an area of the layout that I call Cabbage Patch Junction, perhaps for obvious reasons. And here I have some quite extensive allotment scenes. You can see here that I've placed two of the figures, the man on the right with the fork digging up some cabbages, and his other friend pushing a wheelbarrow up the hill. And you can see in that view the greenhouse, which is quite well stocked with plants and flowers and vegetables. Let's just take a closer look at this man with the wheelbarrow. There he is there. And the thing I like about these figures is that they lend a little bit of activity and interest to a scene which otherwise might just be a bit static. This chap here with the hoe on this little mound area, perhaps doing a spot of weeding between these lettuces. There are quite a few greenhouses, and just outside them are these cold frames. Here, this is the figure with the perhaps punnets restocking the cold frames. The allotments end at the top of a slope which abuts the rear of these tenement buildings. And in this little patch of waste ground, which is an allotment that hasn't yet been planted up, I've placed this figure standing next to a bonfire. And there's also an old Anderson shelter in the scene, probably where he keeps his tools and some of his gardening equipment. So I created the bonfire just using some twigs, which I glued together and then painted red. Of course, a bonfire isn't an actual bonfire unless it's lit. So let's light it up. While we're here, let's take a closer look at that lady putting something in the dustbins. Here she is, a figure from the Bachmann Suburban Street Scene pack. with her arm outstretched. I think she was supposed to be leaning on a wall, gossiping to a friend about the price of eggs. Here I've glued a dustbin lid to her hand to make it look as if she's lifting the lid. Over to the goods shed now, and here you can see the figure on the right was the character who was shifting a milk churn. Here I've placed a couple of other extra milk churns next to him to make it look as if he's engaged on a job moving those. The character on the left is a model scene, Pico model scene figure lifting a crate from off of that pallet. This man works for the National Coal Board and he's from the Bachmann factory workers kit. And here I've used him because his uniform matches the livery of the National Coal Board truck. So here he is loading his final sack of coal into his truck. And finally, in this scene over in the goods yard, I've used the man moving the sack of grain to set up a scene involving other sacks being removed from pallets. There's also a stack of pallets waiting to be broken up and burned in that brazier. Back-breaking work, no doubt, but you can see how adding these figures to these tiny areas of your layout can really add some movement and activity and a sense of interest. You can see that although these were mainly agricultural figures, I've used them in industrial settings and adapted them to the situation. Well, I hope you enjoyed that look at these agricultural figures from Bachmann. I purchased each pack for around £8.43 from Model Railways Direct, and I hope it's given you some ideas as to how you might use similar figures to bring interest and activity to corners of your layout. So thanks very much for watching.